Bonjour, hi from Toronto at the beginning of spring here in Canada. How are you? 1 year into this global pandemic craziness. I started doing video chat interviews over Zoom with people from around the world to ask them how life is like under lockdown where they live. I never guessed that in March of 2021, we'd still be living in various states of quarantine and corona crisis. Here in Toronto, it's been 4 months since all the salons have been closed, which is why I no longer have any bangs. But we're doing okay, and I hope that you are too. But I'm going to keep talking about this time in our lives in a new series of Tea with Me interviews featuring the models from 40 years of goth style global remake. Thank you to everyone who has watched the video so far. We put it out last month, and I'm grateful for your shares and for your react videos. If you haven't watched it, there's a link in the video description. I hope that you do. It's a really fun project showing the evolution of goth fashion with models from around the world, and I'm very proud of what they did and contributed to the project, and I really would like it to be seen. So if you've watched it, you can watch it again to leave a comment or hit the thumbs up. Thumbs down if you don't like it is fine too. It's all good. The algorithm will show it to more people, and I want the models to be seen. I also want them to be heard, which is why I'm going to ring them up on video chat and have conversations with them here on the channel, starting with Roxy Vail. Roxy is a model and performer from Minneapolis, Minnesota, and in our videos she appears at the end for the 2020s and Gothic Grunge style. What the hell is Goth Grunge? Well, before this project, I had no idea, but I heard from many of you that you wanted it to be included. So through the magic of Instagram hashtag searching, I found Roxy's profile, and I'm grateful that she agreed to participate. She's got an awesome sense of style, and we're going to talk to her about what Goth Grunge means to her, how she came to these fashion scenes, and her life in the alternative and goth communities, including a discussion about being Black in the scene and what we can all do to help support people of color in goth and alternative businesses and spaces. Roxy Vail, thank you for joining me on Tea with Me here on my YouTube channel, all the way from Minneapolis.
Minneapolis.
I've never been to Minneapolis. I only, I think of Minneapolis, I think of Prince. Obviously, I think.
Oh, don't worry. When you get here, all you're gonna see is Prince too, and that's all. Everybody worships Prince here.
All right, deal. We're going to talk about Gothic Grunge today because you were the Gothic Grunge model in 40 Years of Goth Style, the global remake. So we're going to talk about that and some other things. But let's get started with tell me what you're drinking here in your tea mug.
I am drinking just plain old chai tea, but I have almond milk in here, so gave it a little razzle dazzle. Oh, look at that. It's like Friday the 13th. I got a Freddy Krueger glove. I don't know if you can see it, but it's like tattooed on my arm, if you can kind of see it ish. But I definitely love it. So
well, this leads me to the first question, which is what the hell is Gothic Grunge? I really didn't know this existed until I started working on this new video and investigating what the new evolution of goth was past new goth, and it's how I found you. So I'm hoping you can explain to us what is this new fashion scene of these two things that seemingly you wouldn't necessarily put together.
For me personally, it was because I grew up and I was heavily into like grunge music because that's what my guardians listened to, and my mother had me young, so that's what the young people were listening to. And like and also like, but I also got into the goth style from not necessarily music but through movies and literature and those things kind of. But when it came to my fashion sense, it was like, well, my style, like when it came to like goths, like all the goths in my like school at the time, like they dressed like they liked Evanescence, so they wore a lot of corsets, and like they were really pretty and like very well put together. And I like I'm really DIY and scrappy, and my clothes are ripped, and like I like plaid, and you know, like things like that. But then if I was around, you know, a bunch of like, you know, kids who were into grunge music, they wouldn't wear as much black and studs and spikes and like edgy stuff like me. So it was like very, you know, combined of the two. And also because like I'm really obsessed with the 90s because I was born in the 90s, and Gothic music and grunge music was really big then, and that was like the really big alt scene back then. So me being an alt person who's obsessed with the 90s, I'm gonna go for those two. Like those speak to me the most. But somebody else could have a totally different definition. But for me, like certain bands that kind of inspired it would be like Jack Off Jill, because she's really, really spooky, but like has a lot of like grunge elements to like the music and like the lyrics and things like that. And like she was definitely what inspired me to like be like, oh, I don't have to choose a side. I mean, like, first of all, why would I have to? I'm bi, I don't choose a side there, so why do I gotta choose a side with my fashion? So like I was like, why not both? So why not both?
When you put it that way, it does make a certain amount of sense. I'm also a 90s baby in that, like, I was young still in the 90s, and
Yeah.
I loved corsets and you know, pre-Evanescence, but I like that really hyper feminine sort of style. I was looking through my archives in preparation for this interview because I had this memory of something, and I wanted to show it to people that I thought might freak some people out. This is an old issue of Propaganda magazine, which for a while in the late 80s and early 90s here in North America was a bit of a goth Bible, fashion scene Bible, pre-internet. And in the spring of 1990, they had
my baby, Chris
Chris
Cornell.
of Soundgarden, as well as White Zombie, Danzig, and Faith No More in Propaganda magazine. And
That's just nothing but that doesn't miss, like especially with the Faith No More. I love Faith No More. Like, oh
now,
my
but
god,
I
I
don't
had their
think,
Year album and I was like obsessed with it. Like,
but I don't think anyone is trying to say that those bands are goth. You're not trying to say
no,
that Pearl Jam's goth.
no, oh god,
Right.
no.
Okay.
Absolutely not. Unless I'm like on my way to my own suicide, like no, I would never say that.
Why do you think, like, some people don't, like myself, you know, didn't know about it. I knew that it was going to people were going to ask questions when they saw it in the video. What is this Gothic grunge?
Yeah.
Some people were angry about it because they only like
Oh, I know.
they only like trad goth, right? Was there like an awakening for you? You said it was around you in your family, but like for me, it was like I was one way until I was 16 and I saw the Love and Rockets video, and then I changed. Like, was there a movie or a record or you know, an image that you were like, oh, I think that's me? Did that happen to you?
I got into goth stuff because I was like 10 years old and I was at a sleepover, and my friend showed me the movie The Craft, and then I was like, oh my god, this is a cool movie with these spooky chicks, and there's a black girl, and like there's cool music, and I'm like, oh my god. So then like the soundtrack was really sick, and then that also like and also got me into like finding more, and I was like, oh well, then that like vampire movie with Aaliyah in it, and I'm like, that soundtrack is amazing. Like, and then it just kind of made me like deep dive into it, and I'm like, whoa. And then like also because I, you know, was reading a lot of like, you know, like Stephen King books and like things like that when I was in like the horror novels and things like that. And then also like I felt like I was always kind of a creep because like I was baptized Catholic. So like we just talked about medieval torture and stuff all the time. And like my school mascot, okay, I went to school called Saint Sebastian, and like his story is that he ended up getting like, you know, impaled by a bunch of arrows, right? And that we'd have his corpse with the arrows just in our classroom all the time as our mascot. It was nothing. And then of course, and then Jesus's corpse on the other side of the classroom. So like, what? And we talked about demonic possession, like spooky stuff, you know, like ritual stuff, you know. So like I just felt like I was always kind of weird. So like I didn't realize that all that weird stuff came with like that people wrote songs about it, and then like other people got interested in it, and that's kind of how I got into it. It wasn't like how a lot of people get into it because of music first, but like I was a kid, so I wasn't able to like participate in music scenes or whatever. So like I had to find it, my own way, I guess.
Yeah, I think people forget a couple of things, when they're gatekeeping about goth and how you have to be into goth music. Like, of course, it is a music-based subculture. We all know that, but times have changed and people are discovering this fashion and this aesthetic like at a younger age. You're talking about being 10. You're not going to be going to clubs at that age. So,
Uh-uh.
of course, your inspiration is going to come from other places. It's interesting that you mentioned that there was a Black girl in the craft, and that was a part of the appeal. Because I did want to talk to you about being Black in alternative and goth subculture.
Yeah.
As much as it can be an uncomfortable conversation for
Yeah.
white people to have, I think we need to have those. I grew up in Toronto. Toronto is known as being one of the most multicultural cities in the world. And
Hmm.
over decades of going to goth clubs and shows, I can count on one hand the number of DJs, promoters, artists who are not white. And I
Yeah.
wonder if it's similar where you live, if you always felt like you could be part of that scene, or if it was a white scene and you were a minority there. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Well, I moved to Minneapolis here like last year, and or not last year, I guess 2019, I guess. But like and this is the only music scene I've ever been into where it was actually accepting, because I grew up in St. Louis, and then I also traveled a lot like in my days, because me being the little street rat that I am, like I was a hobo. So this grunge aesthetic is not calculated. Okay. So like, and I just remember traveling to different places and like checking out like their local scene, and like people were so aggressive, like
Mm.
so aggressive sometimes that they would like physically move me and my friends out of the venue. Like I'm a really lightweight person and I'm 5'3", so like it's very easy to lift me up. So like the fact that like me and my friend were there and we got like actually physically moved out because like these guys did not like that we were there, and that we didn't know all the lyrics because we were there to hear new music because we were tired of listening to the same whack music. And I was like, you know what? Never heard of this band. Let's do it. Like let's find something new. And then like having the scene be so rejecting, or they'll say like act like I'm lost or something, and being like, oh, the insert generic rap concert is not here. Like, what are you doing here? Or like, are you even here for the bands? And I'm like, yes, I am. Like, why is it hard to believe? Or like, if I am like at a club and I am singing along to the lyrics or whatever because they're playing like a Bauhaus song or something, and then all of a sudden people are like looking at me like, how do you know this? And I'm like, what do you mean? How do, by listening to it? Like, it was just like really weird. Like, and then I moved out here, and then all of a sudden people just kind of treat me like, hey, like, cool, you're here, cool, me too. And there's like a lot more POC in the scene anyway, but like, yeah, but it definitely has been a long time coming, because I'm not the youngest person, so like I've been going to stuff for quite some years, and it took till like last year before I could actually say that I was in a scene that was actually really really nice to me. So like that says a lot. Like,
Well, I'm sorry to hear that happens to you. It's upsetting to hear it. I think of alternative subcultures as ideally a sanctuary. People
mhm,
can't necessarily be themselves at their jobs or at their homes or, out in the world all the time, but they can
yeah,
come to a club or they can go to a show and they can feel like they're part of a tribe,
yeah,
and not be judged. I mean, like there are grown men walking around in tutus, like
yeah. It's
how
like it
can
was
you look at someone and be like, you don't belong
yeah,
here?
yeah.
Everyone
Like
here is a weirdo.
somebody could be walking around in a banana costume, and then but will tell me I don't belong here. Like, I'm just like, what is wrong with you? Like,
Well, you mentioned that, it's only been a year or so, and hopefully that means things are getting better.
mhm,
And I know, like most people who work in media at all, there's been a reckoning of thinking about racism and
yeah,
representation in new ways. I
Oh, definitely. Because it's so important because before this, like, there was not much representation at all to the point where, like, people didn't even know, like, other Black people didn't even know they could be into the subculture until they stumble across my profile. And I'm like, dude, be yourself, do what you want. And they're just like, oh, I didn't even know that I could because like people are always telling me you can't do this and be Black or you're betraying your race. Or like I've had people ask me like, what does your race think about you being goth? And I'm like, do you think I'd go to a Black people convention and ask them like the same way your race probably thinks about you being goth? There's white people who love it and there's white people who are total Karens about it, who are like, why do you have that bull ring in your nose? Like same thing here. Like I don't understand like why they act like we're a monolith or that like if I owe my race to be a stereotype and if I don't, they're gonna shun me. It's like, no, they are like anybody else. If I walk past a Black person, they're probably gonna tell me my outfit's sick. You know, like anybody else. Like what?
have also noticed fashion brands, including more diverse models. Again, looking back at my Goth magazine collection and pulling out all the Gothic beauty magazines and other magazines from the 90s and the 2000s, and all of the cover models are white. There are very few um, non-white models on the inside. They're usually ethnically ambiguous, maybe
Yeah.
biracial or Asian, always very light skinned. How are things for Black models in the alternative industry, and how do you think they could be better?
As far as now, like I feel like there is definitely a since the whole George Floyd, you know, uprising, brands have been reaching out to more Black models, but it still feels like the Black model has to be like super over the top. Like they have to be have like a large following. They have to be like extra beautiful. Like they can't just be the way that like white models, you can just be thin and white and you can just get like brand deals all the time. Like I've seen like models like they have to like I don't know, like have to be like over the top just to prove that they're even half as good. And then like then when they do get the breaks that they get, like they tend to use like a lot of the same people, which are a lot of people that are actually my friends in my group chat, which is funny because like which I love seeing them, but like a lot of times I feel like they should be adding having them and other Black models. They shouldn't just be like, oh, here's this batch of people we're going to use for our diversity, and then we're just going to keep reusing these people over and over again without introducing us into new people, you know? And I feel like the way how like white kids have 10, 15 different like influencer faves who look just like them that they can say, these are all my favorites. Why do I have to be like, oh, my favorite Black alt model is Roxy? It can't be Roxy, this person, this person, this person, this person. They feel like there can only be one at a time or something like that. And I noticed that with like brands, they'll like model with like a Black model a lot. And then when her cycle is done, then they'll pick a new one to like be everywhere. And I'm like, you shouldn't act like there should just be one or like there's only room for one. There should be tons of us at the same time flourishing, you know, like it's definitely something that needs to be like improved on a lot. And also not just having more Black models, but more inclusive with their Black models and making sure they're not all racially ambiguous. There's some dark skinned models, there's trans models, there's, you know, plus size models. There's like more than just like, oh, a Black girl who looks like Doja Cat, you know, being like the only acceptable alt model, you know, like there should be so many more types. And I feel like, I feel like it should, if we keep pushing, it should get better. Like, there's no excuse at this point because we're starting to make our own brands and we're starting to do our own things and make our own community. And eventually we're going to make enough noise to where people are like everything Black people do. It's shunned until it pops off and all of a sudden everyone's going to want a seat at the table.
You talked about creating your own thing, and I wanted to ask you about Black owned businesses in alternative and Gothic fashion or industry. Are there businesses that you're a fan of that you would like to recommend?
Yeah, actually, as far as like alternative clothing, like there's Spooky Kids, there's my twin has a clothing, handmade clothing, like shop, with their best friend Mars, and they're both like Black non-binary creators, and their shop is Camp Buzzkill. And then there's like makeup brands like Glam Goth Beauty, and and things like that. But I feel like, as far as, there should be more.
Given these things, even those of us who like to think that we're very smart and woke and anti-racist and nice people and allies and all of that, there's so much to learn. And I'm wondering if there's something about being Black in America, specifically in the alternative subcultures, that you wish more people knew.
Besides the obvious, I do wish that more people would stop making a spectacle whenever they see a Black person at a show or a club or something like that, and acting like we're so different, or like, oh, you're so unique, oh my God, you're so rare, you're just the rarest bird. And I'm like, no, actually we're not. There's a whole community, and pointing us out is just othering us, or like acting like we're one of the good ones. That's not the compliment you think it is. Like, no, like, and I wish more people knew that, like, there are, I have like an entire playlist full of like metal and alternative bands that are fronted by Black people or people of color in general. And for people to say that there's just none of us making music or none of us doing anything, it's like, you're just not looking, or you just don't want to, because we're here, we're here, and we're not rare.
Well, I'm very glad that you're there and here and in my video and on Instagram. I love following you. I think your photos are really fun and sexy, and also your TikTok stuff is like,
Oh yeah, no, I've been clowning on TikTok.
Right?
TikTok. I got one of my TikTok videos deleted the other day because I made a joke. Fine. Like.
Yeah. So before we go, tell people what you're up to and what we can expect from you over the next little while.
Let's see. Recently, I was in a music video. I've done a few magazine. I've been published in a couple of magazines, which one day I will be on the cover instead of just in it. But hey, one day. But I have a few shoots coming up, huh?
We'll put the links down below for people to follow you, so that they can continue to see what you're up to. And hopefully when all this COVID business is over and done with, we will meet in actual person one day. That'd be nice.
Exactly. And like anybody who wants to like meet, and like, because I'm always looking to like, because I did music videos, I do all kinds of stuff, and I'm like, well, I'm always looking to collaborate with people however way I can, like I mean, as long as your project isn't like blatantly phobic, I'm pretty sure I'd be down to help. I mean, I've never done any movies. Love to do acting. I don't know, like anything.
All right. I know you want to see more Black vampire movies, so hopefully that's
me. I'll be in it. I was in theater for a couple of years. I stunk on ice. That's fine.
I saw you. You perform well. You've been pretending to drink tea this whole time, even though it's cold.
I know, because my tea is gone. It's gone. It's empty. But
well, cheers, and stay safe, Minneapolis.